We are here to just facilitate some questions, ask some questions around your security environment to try to build out a plausible scenario for a tabletop exercise. So with that being said, some of these questions are going to be more technically focused, really understanding the tools and technology that you do have in place, understanding some of the protocols and processes that you have in place around incident response. And just your security maturity as a whole, really. So I will go ahead and start asking some more logistical type of questions, some more of those high level questions, diving a little bit into the technical piece, and then I'm going to pass it over to Evan Harrington. He's my colleague from Unit 42 as well, and he's going to be asking some of those more fine-tuned questions.
And quick, Amanda, I'm just going to jump in with the privilege disclaimer very quickly, since I think I see one or two new faces. But as a reminder, I know some of us have heard this at least 2 times through, but for the sake of doing it again, I'm Lauren Murky-Bile. I'm from Hogan Lovells, who's outside counsel to Grail. So as a reminder that this meeting is part of a privileged engagement where we as outside counsel engaged Unit 42 to help conduct this tabletop exercise under privilege. So what that really means for all of you is that there is going to be confidentiality to a certain degree associated with all of this. So meaning that this discussion that we have is intended to be kept confidential and within our privilege group that we've established. I know that we have a number of folks on this call, and that there have been others that have been kind of filtering in and out of this engagement as well, which is fine since everyone kind of has that need to be involved in the engagement. My ask is that if others do in fact need to be brought in, please just let me as the outside counsel or Nora as counsel for Grail know in advance so that we can make sure that others appreciate privilege and confidentiality as well. Any questions about privilege or confidentiality? Great. All right, with that, Amanda, I'll pass it back over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Lauren. All right, so just to get things kicked off and to the broader team, our focus here is really to meet the expectations of Grail when it comes to having a incident that focuses on ransomware with operational impact. We're really looking to test those SEC cybersecurity rules, assessment of the materiality, and then of course determining whether it's a reportable incident, and then how we're going to coordinate with that core team and the required actions and processes to do so. So thank you to the Grail team for providing us such a detailed impact or expectations on that. So with that being said, some of the questions where I want to start is we're understanding that we do want a ransomware focused scenario with the operational impact and some of those privacy considerations. I know that we want to stay away from anything GDPR related, so we're going to make sure that we incorporate that into the exercise to kind of keep this US based, if you will. Were there any other privacy considerations that you all wanted us to include? Any specific privacy rules or privacy considerations that you would like for us to try to incorporate that into the exercise?
That's a good question. I think at a very sort of high level, we would like protected health information that's covered under PHI to be an issue. So we will want that to be hit on in some way. So we'll have to think about our privacy incident response plan as well as our security incident response plan.
Understood. Okay. And both of those playbooks or plans will be shared with us, correct? So we'll
yes, absolutely. Yes.
Awesome. That will definitely be helpful, especially as observing. We want to make sure that we're observing that correctly and that we're following that process with you. So that would definitely be helpful for our team to have a good understanding of that. The next question was, as far as the details of the scenario, were we okay with using the phishing email as a threat vector, or was there a specific threat vector that you all were interested in that is more industry specific?
Danny, Ryan, I think that we're probably okay using phishing given the focus that we've had on it, as well as given the prevalence of it in our environment. Any concerns with using phishing, or are you okay with that?
No, I think phishing is good.
And was there any specifics around the phishing that you wanted us to focus on? Maybe like spear phishing, maybe going, targeting higher up leadership? Or is this something that you would like to start the storyline out where it's impacting, a wider audience, but not really focusing on leadership?
What would be some example when we say phishing, like the initial incoming vectors? Could you give us some example?
Sure. So I have done scenarios before where the threat actor actually did some research on the organization and identified, some higher up, like a CIO or a CEO or someone that works in the financial piece of the organization, and they are directly phished. So what they're looking for is those high level credentials. They're looking for someone who has that high level of leadership. And then so the phishing email would go straight to them. Or we could do more of a broader phish where it's just a threat actor and he's really looking to capture anything that he can from the organization as a whole. So he would just be sending that kind of like a mass email to all employees. So with that being said, there's a few different things that would teach, right? If there's no specific trainings in place for leadership on phishing emails or how those are being communicated across the training program, that's also a good focus. So it depends on how. I know that anything that targets like a CEO or maybe those high level leadership, sometimes that can get a little bit tricky. So I just wanted to touch base with you on that.
My recommendation is, Noah has a hand up, so I'll allow her to comment first.
No, you go ahead, Jenny.
Oh, this is just my personal thought. I remember when we had this tabletop exercise a couple months ago when I first joined, and Abby was also mentioned about phishing, through emails that could potentially send to anybody in the company. So I think that's a good vector, and I know I heard from him, and that's just my 2 cents. I think be a good approach because in theory, email could get rolled to anyone in an organization, right?
Correct. And did you want that email to come in through what looks like a trusted vendor? Is that something that you would like to incorporate where the email maybe comes in to a specific department from a trusted vendor, and then you have also that concern, right, where your team members have to be able to identify whether that is a true and accurate email, where that's coming in from, and we could even identify a trusted vendor of your choice as the sender there.
Yeah, I think it should be, this again, my opinion, it should be look as realistic as possible unless someone really go into it and say, hey, the IP looks funny and the sender, they add an extra character there. It's like, that's the thing, even I look at it, I have to be very careful right now without his email coming in, right? So because everybody's always in a rush, and you have to look at spelling, you look at the sender, you can look at language. So it gotta be really, I think that it's possible.
Okay. All right, perfect. So is there or would there be a trusted vendor that you all would like to utilize? And we don't have to name that right now. And we can also just name we could just say trusted vendor, right? We don't have to call out any organization specifically. I see your thumb up there, Andrew. Sometimes organizations don't like to do that. Sometimes they do. So we can definitely just use trusted vendor in there as a what looks like sender. So with that being said, we'll have a phishing email coming in from what looks like a trusted vendor. We will have the spread of the ransomware. So that's kind of building out our scenario a little bit, giving us a little bit more insight. How do you all feel about a double extortion type of scenario where the threat actor is also exfiltrating data? So now we have a data exfiltration as well as an encryption type of scenario.
Personally, I think that makes the discussion whether to pay or not more interesting because it's not only hey, what's the impact to operations, but it's what's the potential impact to brand.
Absolutely.
And we think about the value of information at risk as a corporate entity. So I think that exploring whichever variant of ransomware is used or the ransomware variant has been identified as one that enables a threat actor to exfiltrate data, I think is helpful as an additional component because then we're looking at not only the recovery, which we're going to want to discuss with them as the potential options, but also the brand maintenance after that.
Yeah, I think that is definitely key here. And with that being said, Andrew, was there any specific threat actor group that you all have buzzing right now that you're hearing a lot about? Or would you like us to identify something that's industry specific? We can also look at our battle cards and see which type of threat actor would be the biggest threat to you right now, and we could go with that if that works for you.
Yeah, we'd appreciate your thoughts on the threat actor and the event actor.
Sure. That's definitely some information that we could pull internally. We can provide that information to you as well and get your thoughts on that as we move forward.
Sounds good.
Awesome. So some of the next questions that I had were really around, so we talked a little bit about privacy. I know that we're going to incorporate third-party vendors. I just wanted to check with you and see, as far as the vendors that are going to be present, are we going to have bodies for cyber insurance, obviously forensics provider, we will have external counsel, is there any other third-party providers that are going to be incorporated within this exercise that would actually be here to respond? So they're going to be present.
Well, Danny, we're going to have our MDR provider, Armature, there.
I think so. It makes sense.
Okay.
Because they'd be part of our actual response. I'm not sure that we're going to have our cyber insurer there. We'll probably have them written into the materials as talk to the team about notifying them, but not involve them directly in the exercise.
Okay. All right. Awesome. And then as far as and this is IRCT, correct? So the Incident Response Core Team, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So as far as that team goes, can we identify the specific individuals that are going to be speaking on behalf of each department? Or even if we don't do that on this call, could you send that over to us so we can identify that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah. So we have a incident response plan that it's kind of pretty much close to finalized.
Okay.
I want to get Noah's approval, and if we can send that over, that will shed some light as what are the core team, what's the extended team. So that will give you probably will answer some of your questions at least.
Okay, perfect. That definitely works for us. And then as far as technical stakeholders that are going to be present, I know we talked about, is it the MDR provider, security ops, we have an incident commander, and then the engineering team. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it'll be for sure myself on the incident management team, Ryan from the security op, and of course Nora and from legal, Andrew, of course. So I think everybody here are part of the core team in terms of this tabletop exercise.
Awesome. And then as far as an incident commander, Andrew, would that be you that's going to be identified as the incident commander?
That will be me. yours truly.
Oh, got it. That works. And then as far as understanding, so our team does need to have a good understanding of what those incident thresholds are for activating like a SEV 1 or SEV 2 incident, but I think we'll identify those once we get to review your IRP. So that will be helpful. So just jumping in a little bit into the technical environment in your processes to try to get a better understanding of that. Once your threat actor is able to infiltrate your systems, we're trying to understand what are the most critical business systems or applications that we want to try to impact by the ransomware. And we're obviously looking for something that would cause significant operational disruption or financial loss here. So thinking about the materiality assessment, how we're going to assess that at the tail end of the engagement, what are some of those critical business systems that you feel like we could impact for most disruption?
I would say our LIMS system is probably the most critical one to operations, that if it's impacted, it shuts down a lot of stuff within our lab operations.
Can you repeat the name of that system, Ryan?
LIMS, I don't know what it stands for, but we call it LIMS.
It stands for Lab Information Management System.
Okay, Lab Information Management System. So is that just your core information system, maybe where all health information is stored, everything from labs? Can you detail a little bit about what critical information would be identified in that system?
So from an operational standpoint, it is the thing that is used to schedule all of our different steps within our pipeline for our lab. In terms of actual data, I don't know if, so pre-post is where a lot of our PHI data is stored, but of course, Nora, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if pre-post is technically considered as a part of LIMS, but again, it is also something that is very tightly coupled with it. So pre-post, LIMS would be from an operational standpoint, pre-post would be from the PHI sensitive data standpoint.
Okay, and where is LIMS hosted?
In AWS and on-prem.
Okay, so both.
Yeah.
Is it like a situation where the data is similar on what's housed on-prem than what's in the cloud, or is there just separate data sets that are stored in each?
That's a good question. That's a better question for a LIMS expert. Nora, Danny, or Andrew, do you know?
I don't off the top of my head what the differences in the data sets.
Okay.
We can find that out though. So we'll take that. I do have a question.
And to be honest, Andrew, we might not even have to dive that deep, right? It really just depends how technical that we want to go, right? Obviously, our team wants to identify a viable threat vector. We want to identify the specifics, but maybe if we're getting too deep in the weeds, you just let us know. It might be a situation where you want to keep the super technical details very light, and we could definitely do that as well. That's completely up to you.
Danny, what are your thoughts on that in terms of how deep technically do you want to go, given that we're going to be testing with the Armature team as well? Do we keep it just at the top level of LIMS shuts down lab, pre-post has PHI in it? Or do you want to do a double or triple click from that in terms of the technical components?
I think if all possible, we should go as deep as possible, because that's kind of the purpose of the exercise, to assume the worst scenario. And it's rather do it now than if there's really attack coming in way down the road, whatever that is. That's just my personal thing. Given the time constraint, if we need some lab people to be involved, provide some technical expertise, we definitely can do that. I think I know a person in RTP, we possibly can pull him in to just provide some additional insight. But my recommendation is let's do it realistic as possible, since we're already in here already. So, and that's just my thought, right? It's prepare the worst, hope for the best.
Right. And that might be best, right, for us to be able to interface with somebody on that team just to get more information and see what security controls are in place for that system and kind of the ins and outs of that system and how it's housed. So we can maybe set up, Danny, something for later this week or early next week if that works for you all, and just dive a little bit deeper into that component if that works for you.
Yeah, I do have a person in mind. He has a lot of knowledge. I think we can definitely run it by him to just get some preliminary information in terms of try to scope this out. Then we can see whether it's worthwhile to continue that path.
Got it. And with this LIMS system, we're mostly looking at patient data, correct? What about financial data or intellectual property? Is there anything like that we would also want to impact?
Yeah, so LIMS data primarily has the protected health information. There is a different system that stores the financial data. I'm trying to find out exactly what that is now. I'm actually trying to see if Carlton can hop on because he has a lot of this historical knowledge. But yeah, we should definitely include the financial data as well. I'm also, in terms of like intellectual property, I'm wondering if we just want to have potential exposure of what's in our Google. We everything's on Google Workspace, so I'm wondering if we want there to be.
That would work. That would be a simple fix, and there doesn't have to be like a whole storyline written on that portion. We could just identify here are the critical components or critical data that was accessed, whether that's the data that's exfiltrated or encrypted. We could still identify that was breached, right? And then that's another layer of complexity to the scenario. Perfect.
Amanda, real quick question for the Grail team. I don't know if anyone on this call has access to this documentation, but if there's any way we could get a list or any HL7 interface documentation you all have. Basically, anything showing those data flows across these health systems. A lot of times those are standardized. Those might be separate POCs that manage those, but that will significantly help us really identify those flows, where things are going, and the data that we can potentially impact across different functions. And we can send that in an email follow-up if we need. I personally, I've recently been working with a few healthcare companies, so it's pretty consistent across those. So I'm wondering if there's similar documentation that you all have for those interfaces.
Let's say, Andrew, don't you have access to a bunch of those data flow diagrams?
Let us see what we have access to, Jack, and let us follow up on that.
Okay. We'll make a note as well.
Perfect.
Carlton's also gonna hop on, and he has been at Grail for forever and a day, so hopefully he'll be able to fill in some of these gaps as well.
Yeah, that's perfect. That is awesome. And then I know that we identified that we do want to test some specific technical runbooks or playbooks that you all have in place. Obviously, there's going to be a ransom situation here, a ransomware situation. So do you all have a specific ransomware playbook that you're going to be referencing, maybe a phishing playbook, anything that we need to make sure that we're collecting from you or reviewing from you prior to jumping into this facilitation?
So we have two sources of ransomware playbooks, and I want to make sure it's okay to share. One is from the MDR, Armature, and the other is from our in-house, it's our internal Confluence, and Ryan knows a little bit back about them, but those are the two sources we have in terms of ransomware. Are they complete? Probably not, but are they a starting point? Probably would be helpful.
Okay, that is helpful. And because what we're looking for, what I'm specifically thinking about in this moment is understanding your severity criteria and how that escalation path works, right? So we need to identify what classifies an incident as a SEV 1 or a SEV 2. We need to understand the internal escalation pathways, if you will, and how that's going to get escalated up to leadership, so we can write that into the storyline and make sure that our scope is appropriate for how this is getting escalated.
So that response plan will be helpful to shed a lot of these lights.
Awesome. And then let me see here.
Amanda, sorry to interrupt. I just want to jump in. Carlton was able to join us, and as I mentioned, Carlton has been at Grail for, I think, probably longer than a lot of folks on this call, and has a lot of historical knowledge. So wanted to just get your thoughts quickly, Carlton, on the systems that would be most impactful for Grail if there was some type of a data exfiltration or encryption event. And right now we talked about LIMS and pre-post. Are there other things that you can think of? Oh, and also just Google Workspace.
Yeah, so pre-post LIMS is the same. I think LIMS has two UI. Pre-post is the UI that contains PHI, where a lot of the session and data goes on, versus analytical LIMS. So yeah, definitely LIMS in general could be a system. Google Workspace, indeed. I'm not entirely sure if the data lake would be impacted, but I guess that's something that someone from the AWS team could probably confirm.
I was thinking that too, because the data lake could have a ton of additional information, like from clinical trials and
Correct.
all sorts of additional stuff. Yeah.
Grail EDC as well, which contains clinical trial data, could be a system that's impacted. I'm not sure, and I can't speak to how interconnected they are. I know the data lake and LIMS is on AWS. I'm not sure if Medrio is a separate application, whether that's AWS as well. Whether that's, I don't think that's Grail built. It could be off the shelf software, but again, those folks will be able to confirm.
So Carlton, that's a good question that I have now. Is LIMS a homegrown application or system, or
Yeah, I believe LIMS is internally built and it's on AWS.
Okay, got it. And you said that that's like the core system, but there is financial data in that system, maybe just in a different interface, or is is the financial data in a separate system?
You know what? I can't confirm whether financial data is in LIMS. That may be a separate system.
Okay.
As well as there could be some financial data there, but
Okay.
yet not to the extent that we did, because or LIMS is our lab system,
Got it.
which means patient data, blood tests, the TRS, the test results and stuff like that.
And if that system were to go down, let's say it was to be encrypted, how would that downstream impact your providers, or like who is using that system to pull that data out?
Yeah, I think we need folks from the LIMS team or probably Milan from software who might be able to answer those questions.
Got it. Got it.
I'm on the privacy team with Nora, so I don't know how the systems work.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's understood. And then Nora, I think that you had mentioned maybe a possible system. I don't remember if you said Paycor or something like that.
The data lake. Yeah, that I think is like kind of colloquial that we use. We have a big data lake where essentially like all of our data feeds into, and it includes our electronic data capture system, our LIMS report, all de-identified data that we create. So that's another area that's worth thinking about, but I do think that there'd be a lot of value in setting up another call with probably someone from LIMS, and then do you think Milan Carlton would be a
Yeah,
good...
I think Milan would be a good SME, and he can speak to how that actually works. We can also ping him to find out who is the LIMS SME, given that Julie is no longer here. But Milan can definitely speak to some aspects of it, including the data lake.
Okay, so we'll want to set that up, sorry.
Let's see, Deepa would be the LIMS expert. That's generally for things in the past that we've reached out to gain more information.
Yes, definitely, Ryan.
And just as an FYI, when we have that separate conversation with them, these are folks that we would not want to be like read into any element of the scenario. So we would just want to keep the questions like, hey, we're preparing for a tabletop. We have some questions about how things work.
Sure, absolutely. We can definitely do that. And then looking at, and forgive me if you guys have started filling this out already. Have you guys started filling out the security tools list? Were you going to provide that, or is that something that you wanted to kind of provide as needed as the scenario flows?
I think we're planning to provide it as needed. That's
Okay.
the list.
Yeah, no worries. So what we'll probably do is after we get the scenario created, we can go back through and identify some of these. But just for a broader understanding, what are your main security tools that come to top of mind that you do have implemented in your environment? So like a SIM or maybe EDR, antivirus.
So we have a SIM. Do you want, I mean, I can tell you what the vendor is if you're looking for specifics around that.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
So for our SIM, we use Panther Labs, and then for our EDR, we are CrowdStrike Shop.
Okay, perfect. And then how many endpoints do you have roughly in your environment?
A lot. If I'm going based off of just what's in CrowdStrike, it's probably around 5,000 to 6,000. I can get specifics if you need that too.
I mean, we could get as detailed as you would like. If you want to leave it as 5 to, we could impact a number that's between there, and that's totally fine. If we even wanted to impact that broad of a scope, right? We could just say that 2,000 systems were impacted if we don't want to go the full amount. So Andrew, that's kind of a question for you. If you've identified what that critical scope would look like from a business operational impact standpoint.
Why don't let's take that one back and discuss it?
Yeah, Yeah, no worries. We could definitely do that. And then with that being said, I want to make sure that we still have time to gather some more of those technical fine details. I know that Evan, you've prepared a list. We may have already hit on some of those, but I want to give you some airtime. So I will pass it over to you, Evan, and then I will just chime in if I have any follow-ups.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, Amanda. And just to confirm, we're going to have a follow-on discovery call to resolve some of these technical gaps. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think the approach here will be from the LIMS. Maybe Andrew, maybe getting someone on here from the LIMS system and some of those applications that we do plan on impacting, just to better fine tune kind of their connections and security controls around those.
Sure, and if you have a set of questions you want to use in that you can share with us ahead of time, we'll prep them on that so they come in and are aware of it, as opposed to just discussing the system itself.
Yeah.
And what the end goals are and how plugged, not at a scenario level, just what those questions will be.
Yeah,
Yep.
if possible, the stakeholders I'd like to be present at that meeting would be administrators for the AWS environment, and then potentially administrators or stakeholders that are familiar with the security controls surrounding that environment as well. That's possible.
Okay, let's look into that.
Okay. So, and we've got 20 minutes left here. I'll keep this somewhat brief as much as I can. So we talked about CrowdStrike for endpoint protection there. How do we, for those endpoints that potentially may not be using CrowdStrike, how do you identify those gaps? Can you walk me through the process?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so we mentioned that for EDR, CrowdStrike is used, and you mentioned a pretty high volume there for 6,000. How do you identify those endpoints that are missing CrowdStrike?
Yeah, so I mean, that is still something that is kind of a work in progress on our side. I mean, we have really good coverage when it comes to our on-prem site. When it comes to AWS, it's a little bit less. And when I mentioned that 5,000 to 6,000, again, that's just a rough number after the last time I looked into CrowdStrike, but a lot of those are going to come from CrowdStrike monitoring our pods, because we're a very EKS container heavy environment.
Okay.
And so identifying gaps comes through numerous ways, looking through the unmanaged assets within CrowdStrike themselves, but then also we're onboarding a asset inventory tool to kind of help expedite some of that through Armis.
Is that asset inventory tool, is that homegrown, or is that you're using a third party?
Yeah, that's a third party, Armis. Yeah.
Can you maybe walk me through, so if an incident did happen, let's use LIMS for an example, can you walk me through the full identification, remediation, recovery path?
Yeah, I think it just depends. Can you give me a starting point as to where my alert comes in from?
Yeah, so I'll give a scenario. So say, for example, one of your users opens up a malicious email. It has an executable that provides potentially a pathway into LIMS, which is that an EC2 instance, I'm assuming, or is it EKS?
EKS. We're all EKS.
Yeah. So it provides a pathway into one of those containers. And so can you kind of walk me through how you'd be able to identify that kind of anomalous activity? What documentation steers those decisions? And just maybe just kind of give me a high level synopsis.
Yeah, in terms of documentation that steers it, that's probably a little bit lacking on our side as of right now. But in terms of maybe how I would just generally go through it, I mean, initially, if I'm able to get the IOCs from the email to identify the domain, then I would do a search within CrowdStrike to see which host potentially reached out to it, to then pinpoint exactly which user was potentially impacted by it. I can also go by their email address as well. I would then probably try to identify to see if there's any lateral movement. And I think, if I remember correctly, you mentioned a potentially malicious script getting or something malicious being installed on the user's endpoint. I would look for lateral movement from that person's endpoint to any of their other systems. So I would start with their workstation, look to see if their communication paths would be towards AWS, if we're looking for the end goal of getting to LIMS. And then I would probably, once I'm able to potentially identify that lateral movement, I would zero in on the AWS account. I would look through maybe some EKS control plane logs to see if there was anything that was maliciously deployed within it. Again, without having too many specifics, that would be my general path, right? Look for initial execution, look for a lateral pass, identify potential IOCs to see if any other environments are potentially communicating with them.
Okay, understood. Does that LIMS system have integrations with any other platforms by chance?
What kind of integrations would you be looking for? Like,
Yeah, API interactions or potentially the ability to do kind of cross-platform communication? Or is it all internal? It's the security group is, or the network rules are keeping it local?
I think you're looking like some third-party providers or something, if somebody else who externally to us would have access to that account. That's a better question probably for a LIMS expert. In terms of maybe integrations, I can see potentially bidding with Octux. I believe we do use, for whatever console is used within LIMS, authentication does come to our Octux instance. In terms of any other API integrations with potential providers or third parties, there's none that comes to my mind initially. A lot of the traffic really for LIMS, how that comes from our workstations to it, or from LIMS to on-prem. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know of any other potentially third-party integrations or third-party systems that would come in.
Are you, you mentioned Okta a second ago, are you using that to federate into the AWS environment?
Yes, we are, yeah.
Okay. Is that MFA controlled?
Yes. Well, Okta is MFA controlled, and then we have AWS Identity Center configured with Okta.
Yep. There's SCIM provisioning. Is that right?
Yeah, SCIM.
Yep. Sorry, I know I'm just kind of blasting questions at you.
No, you're good.
Just looking through my teammates' notes here. Within that LIMS system, I just want to kind of harp on that if I can before I approach other applications. So we identified PHI. Is that the only sensitive data type present within that application?
That's kind of the present pre-post, right, Ryan? I mean, LIMS is pretty much the nerve center.
Yeah, I would like Carl to maybe speak to that.
Are we asking about LIMS?
Yeah, so talking about sensitive data types that are noteworthy.
Yeah, LIMS contain PHI. So we're talking about patient demographic diagnosis and stuff like that. That's not PHI.
Carlton, so question for you. We have some follow-ups noted for the LIMS admins for more specific use cases, but I wanted to note that you had mentioned you have some stake in the privacy and what's going on there within Grail. Within that data that's in the LIMS system, is there any GXP concerns with that? Are you doing any quality control, any test records within LIMS, regardless of the integrations of where that data is going external? If somebody were to breach that system, take the data, tamper with it, do we have any GXP concerns that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, I think we would definitely have GXP concerns talking about our lab systems.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll make a note, Devin, we can kind of move into that later as we get to the development, but just something from a data type we can consider. That's going to have a wealth of audit requirements, different reporting requirements, along with that PHI that we're going to impact.
Okay, yeah, understood. I've got a list of technical questions that I'm saving for the next discovery call. So we talked about that workflow a second ago with that mock scenario, and you had stated that the documentation is somewhat lacking. Comprehensively and maybe at a higher level, would you say that there are technical runbooks that potentially could steer some of those decisions?
None that I know of. Maybe Danny, I know you've been working a lot on runbooks and playbooks, so maybe you would be able to speak to the new things that are being generated. So if we're talking about existing, there might be one or two that I could think about that we have within Confluence, but for the most part, they're very broad. And for that particular scenario, it would really just depend on some of my intuition in terms of how would I start to investigate and start to triage.
Okay.
Yeah, I concur with that. It's very basic, I guess, maybe that's a word. And MDR is relatively new, and they do have a ransomware, playbooks, but I don't think it looks very deep, because when I saw it a couple of weeks ago, I asked for that, in fact, just something we can leverage to build our internal ransomware playbooks. But we're not at the stage we have a comprehensive ransomware playbook, itemized A to Z, 1 to 25 steps. That playbook is not there yet. If you come back to my 3 months later, yeah, probably we're at that stage, but right now we're not at that stage right now.
Okay. And what about an incident response plan? Has that been started?
Yeah, so we have a rebrand one, a refresh one, which was started about a month ago by myself, and with, of course, contribution from Andrew, Noah, and everybody else. It's about, I would say, about 90% baked, but it will give you a good idea on the framework, escalation model, severity. So I think it's a good stage to share right now. It will give you a good idea, and I'll share that to you. And once I have legal approval to share that, and after you read that, I think it should give you a lot of perspective as how we're heading to this in terms of communication, escalation, and severity, of course.
Yeah, just to add to this, so I wanted to flag that Grail does have long-standing and well-tested incident response plans, both from a security and privacy perspective. But we are actively updating them to accommodate our new status as a publicly traded company, and to make sure that they're cleaner with respect to escalation paths, and also that there have been changes in processes, changes in leadership. So you will be getting incident response plans and privacy breach response plans that are in quote unquote draft form right now. But if it's helpful for you to see the prior versions as well, we're happy to provide those. Just, don't want to suggest that we don't have playbooks or that these are brand new processes. It's just we're improving them and updating them.
Understood. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So what I may do in that regard then is save some of my IRP questions until we receive that documentation. And if there's discrepancies or gaps that are identified, I can revisit, if that's okay.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Yep. Let's see. So let's talk about logging if we can. So let's go back to that mock scenario. So an incident happens, and you go to review logging and anomalous activity. Can you talk about, we had talked about a SIEM earlier, which was Panther Labs. Maybe kind of walk me through the logging and monitoring as it's currently established.
What do you want to know? What we have potentially integrated? If I can speak to that particular scenario, in terms of what we maybe apply to that area. So we have logs for all Google Workspace, particularly on email, what I'm kind of getting to there. We have CrowdStrike FDR logs full. We have CrowdStrike console itself. We do have CloudTrail logs as well, so we'll be able to capture some there. Things that will be lacking in this scenario, at least things that are integrated within the SIEM, would be probably the VPC flow logs, potentially, if we want to look from the networking side. Yeah. Specifically within AWS. So those logs are within the account, but they're not centralized into the SIEM. But we also do have, let's say, VPN logs as well, because that would be the primary way that somebody would actually be able to gain access to AWS or a resource within AWS. So we have those logs in the SIEM. EKS control plane logs, I know I mentioned those. Those are not in the SIEM, but those are hosted locally within the accounts, so there would be access there. I think in terms of other logging, those are the only ones I could see that apply to this particular scenario off the top of my head.
I want to save this for the next discovery call, but I do want to ask, within that AWS environment, is there a centralized logging account?
Yeah, we do have one. Yep.
Great. Okay. And is that where the SIEM is currently ingesting from?
Some of the logs, yes. So the centralized logging account, that's where we're collecting CloudTrail. That's where we are, kind of hosting our own data pipelines for a lot of our
security systems such as CrowdStrike and then pushing it downstream to our SIM. But in terms of a lot of logs for AWS being centralized there, that is a work in progress. Some things are there, but it's not fully covered, I would say.
Yeah, understood.
So Evan, quick question.
Sure.
So since we've identified that the LIMS system is hosted in the cloud and on-prem, I wonder, is there impacts that need to be done to both of those systems, or could we just impact one of those systems? And if that's the case, we probably should identify which they would like to impact, correct? Whether it be the on-prem or in the cloud, or as far as like the vector or how we're getting into it.
Yep. Yeah, great call. And I'll go ahead and evangelize this for the conversation as well. So the LIMS system, now is that one for one on-prem and cloud, or are there portions that are hosted on-prem and portions hosted on the cloud?
The latter, to my knowledge. There's portions that is hosted in AWS, utilizing AWS services specifically, such as things like SNS, SQS, for however they operate. And then I know there are some LIMS clusters hosted on-prem for various things as well. Again, couldn't speak to all the technical specifics. Definitely we need a LIMS SME, but it is kind of split that way, where there are certain things in AWS and there are certain things on-prem.
Theoretically, if an attacker went after the on-prem and attacked a critical component, could it entirely disrupt the functionality of the system?
To my knowledge, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you just stayed with on-prem, right? I mean, if you just started encrypting systems, yeah, 100%.
Okay.
There's also the scenario of if you cut off access between on-prem and AWS, that would also have major impacts as well.
Do you know, is in addition to VPN, is there direct connect between on-prem and AWS?
Correct, yeah. So we have IPsec tunnels from our on-prem sites to AWS. We have transit gateway hub set up. So everything is traveling internally as far as I know. And then we have for our VPN, so we use Prisma Access from Palo Alto. We have IPsec tunnels from our Prisma Access to AWS as well.
Nice, okay. Yeah, that's one thing I was gonna go after was redundant communication or pathways, but it sounds like that's well established, so.
Yeah, for the most part, I would say, yeah.
So. Ryan, I feel like you and I should just stay up next 30 minutes to talk about AWS. I didn't realize you were so familiar with it. I thought there was another team coming on. So would you say that you're the AWS SME? Or
I would say I know a decent amount, a fair amount, just from a lot of security operational stuff. But there are other people who would know more specifics too, the potential accounts or systems that we know might be involved within the scenario.
Okay.
But I can definitely, I can definitely answer a good amount of questions myself, and then obviously anything I don't know, I know a person who we could get the answers from.
So one thing that has, I would say, manifested for me would be the potential for either not identifying or misidentifying data types within the environment. And so can you kind of walk me through the data classification and tagging strategy within the AWS environment?
Yeah, so that is, so we do have an asset tagging standard when it comes to AWS. We do have modules that make it easier for people to be able to utilize them and actually tag assets. In terms of a system that is routinely doing that, we are in the works of setting up AWS Macie from the S3 standpoint to be able to routinely identify information and then also replicate that into our actual asset tags. But for things outside of that, I think Carlton or Nora, you might have better visibility into this. I know there's components of Reliance potentially doing this. I know there's components of Alation being able to catalog our data. But yeah, that's kind of the extent of my knowledge on it.
So you'd mentioned a cataloging platform a second ago. Can you repeat that again for me?
Alation.
Alation, okay. And is that able to identify data types present within the environment? So say, for example, I inadvertently upload PHI into an S3 bucket. Would it be able to identify that I've uploaded PHI there?
Not to my knowledge. I don't believe so.
Okay.
No. That's where the Macy side is really kind of coming in. I think from a relation standpoint, I don't think it's actually classifying data types. I think it is just cataloging.
Okay.
But again, I'm no expert in relation. I just know that that is a tool that has been used and I believe is still currently used.
Sure. And
Yeah,
then,
correct, Ryan, and Milan would be able to speak to the Elation application and how it actually works as well, because he's heavily involved in the utilization of that tool.
Yeah.
and so going back to the tagging of resources and assets, is that more of a administrative control versus preventative, or would you say that the configuration is such that resources can't be spun up without specific tags?
Yeah, so you bring up a good point, because this is actually something that we are in the process of remediating. Tagging in AWS has always been a long story for us. But when it comes to administrative or preventative, it really is, it's been very distributed between each team to make sure that they are tagging their resources. We have a standard, we make it easy for them to use it. We're moving away from, the onus just to be on the owners of these particular projects or resources, and moving to the side of having a auto remediation in place to tag these resources for us. We are not at the state yet of where we can prevent the deployment of resources that don't have tags through SCP policies, but that is a place that we are wanting to get to.
Got it. Sounds good. I know we're at time here, Amanda. I think we have 2 minutes left, so I just want to be mindful of everyone's calendars.
Yeah, thank you, Evan, so much. I think this was a good session today. I think this really helped us build a foundation to start looking at a scenario outline, and then we can fine tune some of the details once we get on the call with the LIMS expert and some of those additional systems. So maybe that's next step here. I know, Lauren, you wanted to set something up for early Friday, just to kind of review what we have before sharing it with the broader team. If there's a way that we could get something on the calendar before Friday with the LIMS system expert, that would be perfect. If not, we totally understand, but we are available to meet with you all this week.
Sounds good. We'll look into the LIMS contact that we have and follow up as soon as we can.
Okay, perfect. And I think we're good from there. So we'll go ahead and start working on building out what we can on our end. We're going to be building the plane as we're flying it here a little bit, but I think we're going to be in a good spot. So Lauren, if you just want to follow up, or I can send you an email with my availability for Friday.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And go from there. Do you also want to be on the call with the LIMS expert?
Yeah, go ahead and just include me. I may not be necessary, but I'll just have visibility that way.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
So Andrew, if you just want to give availability for that person, we can go ahead and get that call set up and add Lauren to that, and then I think we're good to go.
Sounds good.
All right, well, thank you all so much. I think today was really productive, and looking forward to talking with you later this week.
Thanks all.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Okay.